Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Well, what an interesting weekend. On Friday, Iran went to the polls and voted for Hassan Rouhani, the president who cut the deal with President Barack Obama to denuclearize Iran and bring them into the world of nations. Now, you know, I get it that that Rouhani, while he has the title of president, and he has some considerable power associated with that, he's still got the mullahs above him. So you can't really say that Iran is a complete democracy or anything like that, but this is still moving in a very, very positive direction. Right? This is what happened on Friday. And in fact, I think one of the reasons why it's so significant is Rouhani won 74% of the vote. They had an over 70% turnout. This was massive. And when Rouhani was running for office, he said things like his main opponent was a guy named Ibrahim Raisi. And Raisi had been a judge on a court that, on behalf of Ayatollah Khomeini, way back in the day, back in '88, I think it was, executed a bunch of political prisoners. And so Rouhani trashed him for that, for being, you know, like a right-wing extremist. He says, you know, the people who say no to those who over the course of 38 years only execute, the people will say no, in other words, vote for me instead of this guy, to those who over the course of 38 years only executed and jailed. Raisi was on this death commission. Rouhani said, those of you who cut out tongues and sew mouths shut, those of you who over the past years only issue the word banned the pen and banned the pictures, please don't even breathe the word freedom, for it shames freedom. This is how he ran for president. Now, yeah, I mean, you know, he's arguably an insider. It's sort of like they elected, you know, Obama instead of Bernie. I mean, it's not like Rouhani is some incredible guy who's going to just, you know, but the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of Iranians in an election, 3/4 of them, said we want better relationships with the rest of the world. The next day, Donald Trump goes to Saudi Arabia, which has never held an election, at least for senior leadership, never held an election. It's a friggin' kingdom. Every single person in power there is in power because they're members of the Lucky Sperm Club, because who their fathers were. And he goes to, you know, Iran is making reforms with regard to women and education and healthcare. I mean, all kinds of, you know, frankly, good stuff is happening in Iran. And Trump goes to Saudi Arabia, and they bring all these other Sunni Arab countries in. Now, the leader of Iraq was there, but he's not, you know, he's a Kurd. So, to the best of my knowledge, I mean, I went through the list. I don't, King Jordan, or the king, what's his name, of Jordan? The king of Jordan was there. And he's a Hashemite. And yeah, Abdullah II, thank you, Troy. And I think that the Hashemites are, well, I don't know that much about, but what I do know is that Donald Trump essentially declared war on Shiism. That what happened Saturday, and this, Louise and I had lunch Saturday with a friend of ours, and just by coincidence, I mean, this is brunch. We had scheduled this like a week ago. And he was born in Iran, came to the United States years ago, back in the 70s, you know, has done very well for himself here. Has been back to Iran, in fact, met with President Khatami. And, you know, he's a very progressive guy. And he had just, on the way over to the restaurant where we met him for brunch, he had heard Trump's speech, and he was trembling. I mean, he was just shocked. And he was like, I am seeing the beginning of World War III. This is the creating of an other. And it hit me, you know, he's absolutely right. Trump has decided, you know, he's got to have an enemy. And for a while, his enemy was China. But, you know, then President Xi came over and gave him some presents and acknowledged him. And so, you know, his enemy isn't China anymore. He's sort of, you know, Mexico is sort of his enemy. But then he figured, you know, a bunch of American companies came to him and said, you know, we do $500 billion a year in business with Mexico. You don't want to screw that up. He's like, oh, okay, all right. So who's going to be our enemy? Well, how about that country that Obama cut a deal with, Iran? There's a war inside the Islamic world going on between between Shiism and Sunnism, between the Sunnis and the Shias, and this goes all the way back to the death of Muhammad and the battle for secession. You know, was it going to be his relative or his student? And this was the beginning of the Sunni-Shia split. And this war is still going on, and we just took sides in it. It looks to me like Donald Trump has just, like the United States has just officially taken the side of the Sunnis in the Sunni-Shia conflict. And who are the Shiite countries? I mean, you know, Iran is now majority Shiite. Excuse me, Iraq is a majority Shiite. Of course, Iran is. And Syria. And we're lining ourselves up with these Sunni dictatorships. Most of the people in that group were never elected. They were all hereditary, not all, virtually all hereditary monarchs. And this just concerns me tremendously. Here's what Donald Trump, here's the piece of his speech that were I in Iran, I would be freaked. And I want to share with you, Rouhani has actually responded to this now, and his response is encouraging. But here's the president. Here is Donald Trump.
Until the Iranian regime is willing to be a partner for peace, all nations of conscience must work together to isolate Iran, deny it. Funding for terrorism cannot do it. And pray for the day when the Iranian people have the just and righteous government they so richly deserve. The decisions we make will affect countless lives. Until the Iranian regime...
Yeah, and he goes on. Until the, you know, it's just, he's so, you know, Rouhani then, you know, he said, our nation's message in the election was clear. This is Rouhani. Iran's nation chose the path of interaction with the world away from violence and extremism. He just came, you know, that's it. He said it. Trita Parsi, president of the National Iranian American Council, more, you know, moderate Iranian ancestry, brilliant scholar, Trita Parsi. He wrote, Rouhani's convincing win is a sharp rebuke to Iran's unelected institutions that were a significant brake on progress during Rouhani's first term. It was also a rebuke of Washington hawks who openly called for either a boycott of the vote or for the hardline candidate Raisi to win in order to hasten a confrontation. So now, you know, now Trump is in Israel. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens when he goes to meet with the leader of the Palestinian Authority. But you know, right now it's all you know, so much of this is just song and dance. And we'll see where it all goes. But I'm so concerned. I feel that the Saudis completely played Trump. You know, he said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to come in," and they were like, "Oh great, let's pull together a bunch of Muslim nations all Sunni or close to it. And let's, isolate Iran. I mean, it's like right after the United States just had 8 years of foreign policy of trying to bring Iran into the world. So my Iranian friend, he's an American now, has been for many years, that Louise and I had brunch with on Sunday. He made the point that separation feeds war, that we need to be bringing people together rather than identifying, the other, that light without love or heart isn't really light. It's like Lucifer, right? This is my phrase. It is fear. It's separation from life. He said that Trump was speaking of terrorism without any understanding of what is causing terrorism. Well, I would add to that the incredible irony of going to Saudi Arabia and saying we've got to stop those who promote and fund terrorism when 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 were Saudis. And Saudi Arabia is the largest funder of Wahhabist, a.k.a. extremist mullahs all around the world right now. And, Trump goes and puts his hands on the psychic orb, and suddenly, and the magic walk to the anti-terrorism center, the King Salman anti-terrorism center. Well, Saudi Arabia is a police state. I mean, no wonder Trump felt comfortable there, right? He's surrounded by billionaires. They're hereditary billionaires. There are no women allowed. And by the way, if you grab them by the crotch, they cannot protest. They can't even go to court without the permission of their husbands or fathers. I mean, Trump must have thought he just died and gone to heaven. Anyhow, my friend, he said, to put in our minds a reference point in fear of the other, which then Trump defines who is this other. Well, in this case, it's going to be Iran. And he's going to tell us who to be afraid of. Iran that just had an election where 74% of their population said, we want reform. We want to engage with the rest of the world. Another of his points was, my friend is a Sufi mystic also. He said that mercy is the most powerful force. These people are lacking. These men, Trump and the people around him, are lacking in mercy. And which I think is just so very, very true. Saudi Arabia is a brutal, brutal country. You get out of line. I mean, they imprison political protesters. There are people in prison for tweeting things about the king. You do not speak out in Saudi Arabia. Somebody needs to tell Wilbur Ross that. And then he said, not meeting the needs of our own people nor around the world, so a few rich can control everything. They want to hoard it all. Racism, hatred, hate of the less privileged. It's in the interests of money and power to have a war.